Baldur's Gate 3, a game that needs no introduction but deserves one anyways. Based on the world and mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons, Baldur's Gate 3 is a computer role-playing game where you wander about Faerûn in search of a solution to an itty-bitty parasite problem that's always in your head. It's a game where you can choose to be a hero, a villain, or somewhere in between. I hadn't really played the game since I beat it sometime before patch 8 came around, but I recently decided to dust off my files and play once more for old time's sake, and also to try out the mods. To start, I played like normal, picking a different class and race and coming up with a character backstory to affect my choices differently than the last time I played. I exploded General What's-His-Face and stole his hot sword in the Nautiloid, not that I could even use it. Looted a long-forgotten church, where I made friends with a resident bone diva, fought some gobs, and meandered about a hippie commune. And then, I reached the Blighted Village. The Blighted Village has several places of interest, including and quite limited to the workshop, the schoolyard, the apothecary, the windmill, and the shrine within the owlbear cave. In the house above the workshop, there's a note from Damon Briscoe regarding strange riders in these parts. In the note, Mr. Briscoe speaks of riders from Eltergard, a kingdom within Faerûn, but, more importantly, he mentions being descended directly from the original Selûnite settlers of this village. If you don't know the geographical setting of Dungeons & Dragons, that's okay. Neither did I. Toril is the world, Faerûn is the continent, the Heartlands are the central populated sector of Faerûn where most adventures take place, and both Eltergard and the Sword Coast are in the western portion of the Heartlands, with the Sword Coast being where Baldur's Gate is located. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the Hell Riders acted as the primary armed forces of Elturel, the capital of Eltergard. Presumably, this means that the Blighted Village, once known as Moonhaven, was founded before then, perhaps even sometime in the 13th century. And considering Mr. Briscoe's tone in the letter, he, at the very least, was proud of his village and its people, and felt a sense of superiority. A similar spirit of superiority is found in a notice by a pile of books near the schoolyard. A warning to the Sword Coast essentially serves to spread propaganda about how dreadfully awful tieflings, drow, dwegar, and other underdark creatures are, and how they're infiltrating our world. Except, the author has a bit of a point, at least for the drow. In the home of the smith, there's a hole covered in calcified web, serving as a subtle foreshadowing of what's below. If you go down the well or destroy the workshop's walls, you'll find a small cave system that has a little spider infestation problem. There's also one particular skeleton that is important, but we'll focus on him later. Instead, let's look at the side room that looks to have housed someone at some point in time. It's long since been abandoned, but 4 journals, one bloody, one burnt, one tattered, and one web-covered, alongside a diagram can be found that give us a glimpse of what happened. The bloody journal, written by Eliette, tells us how she was a high elf captured by drow and exalted by Lolth, a drow deity of trickery and war, also known as the Spider Queen. In the tattered journal, Eliette further shows her devotion, or perhaps a more apt term would be obsession, to Lolth. She also mentions gifts given by the Dark Mother, boots that allow her to walk on spider silk without getting caught in the webs, and the corpse of a drow that could temporarily turn into a spider. The burnt journal only has 2 sentences. In her form, I find ecstasy. The spell is not enough. One can't help but wonder if Eliette truly worships the Spider Queen, or if maybe the goddess of trickery, known for being cruel, cunning, and one who demands veneration, perhaps had a part to play in Eliette's transformation. The diagram depicts a ritual where the spell becomes permanent, where Eliette's form will forever be altered. And finally, the web-covered journal has Eliette writing how the time has come, how she will finally transcend blasphemous flesh, how she will become a matriarch. Where you fight the phase matriarch spider, once known as Eliette, there is an ominous hole in the ground that, if you jump in, hopefully while having cast Featherfall, you will land in the Underdark. Where did the drow come from? Eliette was a high elf that was either taken to or willingly went to the Underdark, was captured by Lolthsworn drow, or drow that worship Lolth, until the day she escaped back to the Whispering Depths, where she fanatically researched for a way to become an arachnid, just like her goddess. It's unsure when exactly this all takes place, as face spider matriarchs live for hundreds of years. So, this could all have occurred even before Moonhaven's first settlers arrived, or it could have happened around the time A Warning to the Sword Coast was written. Perhaps Eliot was one of the victims of the Lothsworn Drow that inspired their addition to the note. Or maybe it really was just hateful propaganda against any race that wasn't human, elven, halfling, or dwarven. The workshop forge is filled with tools a smith would use, as well as a plethora of weapons. But what we really care for is this chest, where if you skillfully disarm the trap inside, you'll find the true gem of this room, the schematics for a masterwork weapon by Dita Highcliffe. There's also the blacksmith's note that tells us that there is an unknown metal in the workshop, which we would know to be infernal iron. A metal that the blacksmith thought came from the Underdark, and that it was given to the smith by Redacted. It's just a theory, a game theory, but I think perhaps Samson, the smith who owns this workshop, and Eliot were involved in some way, and due to the workshop's location, had easy access to the cave underneath. Eventually, Eliot left for the Underdark, where after she escaped, she brought back that infernal iron for Samson. Or perhaps another smith that came before him. I'm admittedly unsure whether or not Samson is a human, elf, or a half-elf. All I know is he had gout. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to assume Samson was the smith in this theory. Despite Eliot's return, she would not want to leave the cave. I imagine Samson attempted to help her at first, giving her the supplies and tools you find in her camp, but eventually became too heartbroken by Eliot's zeal for Lolth. And so, the blacksmith built walls around the workshop as a way to metaphorically and literally separate himself from his grief. Walls that could be easily broken by 3 swings of a sword or a well-placed spell. Walls that were left untouched. The house above the workshop is also very clearly belonging to someone who works as a smith, with tools and weapons left about. It's mostly been destroyed with time, with hardly any furniture and a few crates that survived. You can, however, find a couple of notes and a journal here, as well as a table with a necklace of Selûne and an incense. Walking beyond the still standing parts of the house is a desk, much like the one in the workshop. Here, there are 2 notes named Faded Instructions and Faded Blueprints. It's not really well defined which desk belongs to which resident, Samson or Highcliffe, but I'm of the mind that the one in the forge belonged to Highcliffe, both because it is by that desk you find her blueprints, and because in the healer's log found in the apothecary's basement, there is some information on both Highcliffe and Samson. Samson's become accustomed to the good life since he acquired that new apprentice. Another burn for Samson's eager young apprentice. Between the two, it's clear that Dita Highcliffe was the one who had more passion for the craft. And perhaps Samson was simply too heartbroken by those walls still left standing. Highcliffe's journal tells us that she finally surpassed her legendary master and knew how to create something spectacular, although she never really lived to see it through. But how is it that Samson is considered legendary, yet seldom goes to the forge and possibly uses uninspired blueprints and instructions for his craft? Well, I might be reaching here, but when you head towards the village using the main entrance by the bridge, the first thing you'll find there are the fallen bodies of the adventurers in Eridan's party, the party you encounter trying to find shelter in the Druid's Grove. Unless he died, you'll also find Eridan standing by those bodies and he'll talk to you, telling you that they had an encounter from a wizard in Baldur's Gate that wanted a relic, the Night Song. He'll say that it's in a temple somewhere below where the goblins made camp. Yet, it's here where we learn of the Night Song. Here, in front of the Blighted Village, a place where Selûne, a goddess of the moon and the antithesis of Shar, was worshipped. A place left to ruin. A place that once housed a legendary smith. It could be a mere coincidence, or simple foreshadowing for the camp and future events. Or, perhaps, Samson was the one who crafted the legendary spear now found in Shar's temple, a spear that can hold the blessing of either of the sister goddesses. Close to another entrance to the village is the Owlbear Cave, where you can find a statue of Selûne alongside some offerings, including a book that briefly mentions the conflict between Selûne and Shar, sisters who rule different aspects of the night. Selûne being the moon goddess of wisdom, guidance, life, and goodness, and Shar being a goddess of the dark, cold void that can be the night. There's also a chest that needs a prayer read to Selûne to be opened. If you have her in your party, Shadowheart will immediately start insulting the worship of Selûne, And, with further dialogue, you can get her to reveal her status as a worshipper of Shar if she hasn't yet disclosed it.
I worship Shar, mistress of the night, Selûne's twin and foe.
Between that interaction and the book on the ground, you can begin to piece together one of the most important background conflicts of the game, Shar versus Selûne. In the aforementioned chest is a necklace named Moondrop Pendant that allows the wearer to avoid opportunity attacks if they're at half health, as well as a note on the Selûnite tradition of sending children to the forest to see if they're able to survive on their own. When a youngster came of age, they would be left to fend for themselves deep in the wilds. There, they would show their skill of navigation and self-reliance, as well as their determination to return to the Moon Maiden's silvery glow. I believe this cave, somewhat far from the village, houses the Light of Selûne. There's a hole in the ceiling of the cave, allowing light to shine on the statue. This, of course, includes the light of the moon. The pendant has an inscription on the back, under a delicate crescent moon. "You're a novice no more, Robin. Only right you should carry a little of Our Lady's light with you." Perhaps Robin was a child sent deep in the woods to search for Selûne's silvery glow, where they would then read a prayer to their goddess and receive a gift befits someone who's proven themselves a true follower of Selûne. And yet, the chest stayed locked, and the gift never found its recipient. Robin might have never made it to the cave after all. The symbol of the schoolyard is an owl, a bird both associated with wisdom as well as Selûne herself. It's an animal said to be sent by the moon goddess as a guide to those she cares for. One that is a perfect mascot for a Selûnite education system, a system meant to guide children with wisdom. Like with all other areas, there are many things to find within and around the schoolyard. Inside are education books. I know, shocker. They're quite interesting and expand a bit on the lore of Selûne. The Folly and the Fall talks about a 4-part tragedy detailing the fall of Netherell and its exile to Shar's Plane of Shadow. Netherell and Karsus are a story we learned from our resident shoe eater. He tells us how Karsus attempted to steal power from a god and became one himself, only to fail and kill Mistral. Selûne used to be a greater goddess during the time of the ancient Netherell, and is credited with saving the city of Opus from a similar fate of Netherell. I don't recall there being any information in Baldur's Gate 3 detailing Selûne's involvement in Netherell, but finding this book in a Selûnite school is quite interesting and makes sense, especially considering how a whole part is dedicated to Shar's participation in the tragedy. Also, this is an aside, but I love that the name of the bard who penned the story is Bragan Feg, a name that sounds strangely similar to Dragon Egg. What a lovely fantasy name, wouldn't you agree? Around the school, you can also see loads of books, some that give more context to Faerûn overall, and some that serve as Aesop fables. The Boy and the Beholder is Faerûn's version of The Boy Who Cried Wolf, the Dim-Witted Drow is basically careful what you wish for, and the Magnanimous Miner is about the rewards of helping others. There's another book found here, though this one is far more dour. The old school book tells us that after some time, as pages progress, more and more pupils' names vanish from the entries. Someone has to investigate what's become of the missing children and their families. Finding this book can trigger a cutscene for Shadowheart, unless you trigger it by Selûne's statue near the windmill, which I did. It's this cutscene, or the one by the statue, that implies Shadowheart might be from this village, or, at the very least, from a village much like this one that suffered through the very same fate. There's also a missing poster on the wall just outside the building. Maggie Terrans, Marcus Terrans, Mathan Deach, and Rachel Kirk. All children whose names have stopped appearing in the old school book. Going upstairs, not that there's much left of it, with a successful perception check, you can find a cute little note from Amanda wishing Flora a happy birthday, and mentioning a painting of the two getting married. It's very wholesome until you read the following part. I hear silence in the classroom next door, and that is never a good sign. If you go outside the Blighted Village, just a bit to the northeast, you'll find the bestest boy in all of Faerûn, perhaps tied with a certain owlbear cub, and perhaps even us. If you can cast Speak with Animals, you might get the information that there are gnolls up ahead. But we don't really care about that. Instead, what we care about is the letters that the courier was carrying. One gives a little foreshadowing for what's in Baldur's Gate. One mentions how perilous the trip can be, and finally, the one we care about, is the one named Soft Letter. See, Flora gave birth to Davin Jr. and sent a letter to her lover to spread the good news. Soft Letter is a letter written by Flora to Davin, not Amanda. Could it be a different Flora? Certainly, but I doubt it. Considering Eliette and Briska's lineage, it's not too far-fetched to assume Flora was perhaps an elf. Perhaps she outlived Amanda, or whatever it was that caused the silence in that classroom that no longer exists, claimed Amanda. Alongside the letter is a child's drawing. Considering how well-worded Amanda's letter is and the artwork is titled drawing and not painting, I'm assuming that wasn't Amanda's work, but perhaps that of a child she taught. Amanda's note was kept where it was hidden, so I doubt it ever found its way to Flora. But perhaps a child saw the painting and switched it out for a drawing, or perhaps they wanted to be included in this. Admittedly, I'm not too sure about this one. Much like everywhere else, the apothecary building looks and feels like a place long abandoned, but that once saw plenty of use. The building has two sections, one for the apothecary shop and one for the homeowner to live in. The home is very cozy and, despite its ruined state, gives an air of someone who is in a comfortable financial situation. The bed is quite spacious, there's a bath, plenty of furniture, decorations, and what I'm assuming is either a fake plant or one that had a preservation spell cast on it. No way this thing survived like this for decades. There's another world-building book about Phandalin, but more importantly, there's a household prayer. Lathander to light, Selûne to guide, Kelimvor to judge, and passage provide. Lathander is a god of birth, dawn, and renewal. He is also known as the Morning Lord, just as Selûne is known as the Moon Maiden. Selûne is also known to be associated with life. Strangely, Kelimvor is a god of the dead, but he is one that has strong distaste for necromancy and the undead. Do keep that in mind. The apothecary building is equally a showcase of monetary comfort with lots of materials, books, decorations, and ingredients, all things that would be quite costly. There's 2 books here, one that teaches the rules of 3 to give an explanation of how alchemy works in the game, and a book that serves to tell us that there's a cellar and that there's a specifically requested plant that's to be kept secret, for some reason. Going down the cellar, we see a much better preserved room that is spacious and well decorated, with 2 desks. Here is where we find the healer's log, as well as a book on healing potions. The book will, unsurprisingly, teach you how to craft a healing potion if you don't already know. But there's a part of the book where someone filled the pages with repetitions of, "Why is it always healing potions? This goddamn primitive village!" And the occasional, "Someday, I'll kill that mongrel of a master." I believe it's a safe conclusion that the apothecary had an apprentice who wasn't too fond of him. Which reminds me, remember that one particular skeleton I mentioned way back in the video? The one in the Whispering Depths? Yeah, that was his apprentice, and he had a journal with him where we can read this. "I left my homeland because I was bound to my master, not because I chose to. Were it not for the oath I swore, I would still be home, serving the Zulkirs." They did it! The Dart Justiciars got the old bastard before the Zulks could. Once he's gone, I'll be free of this oath. I can go back. I'll return the tome of necromancy he stole. They'll forgive me then. They'll know I'm loyal. The key's gem is secure in the tunnels. Except, he decided to hide the key gem right where the matriarch spider Eliette made her spider den, and ultimately fell victim to her, never quite making it back to the Zulkirs. To give some context, Zulkir is a title very similar to councilmen with a total of 8 members, one for each school of magic, and they are essentially magical leaders that rule the Red Wizards of Thay, with Thay being a country located in the eastern heartlands and is considered both inhospitable but well populated. They're big fans of necromancy and general evil-doing over there, or so I've read. Going further in the cellar, you can find a lever that reveals a secret passage. There's a bunch of loot crates, caskets, that, if you are to open them, reveal undead guardians. There's one crate, however, that instead of an undead guardian, houses a dark journal. In it, you read how Ilin Toth, the apothecary, and also a wizard of Thay, sought asylum in Moonhaven on the 6th of Nightal, 1371, with the purpose of researching true revival. Passing by the mirror, beyond the room with caskets, you'll find Ilin's true laboratory, where you'll find even more notes and curious artifacts. The Collectania Rubrum contains multiple guides on death and reanimation. The research notes show us Ilin's many failed attempts. There's a book on the Netherese Empire detailing their fall, as well as their capacity for advanced magic. There are 2 studies considered too heretical and extreme to publish, the Netherese one, and then one on resurrection. One was the value of life, and the other about Netheril and the Flame. Ilin Toth was truly seeking a way to revive somebody, perhaps the woman he loved, but was unable to with the magic he knew. He tried anything and everything in his desperation, including stealing the necromancy of Thay. Yet the book refused to aid him. The Moonhaven logs give us more dates and show us how paranoid Ilin was, considering his crime. This log details the downfall of Moonhaven, Not to the wizards of Thay Ilin was so concerned about, but of raiders donning black armor, raiders that took some of the townsfolk, and that, on the 20th of Nightel, raided the village for the last time and killed Ilin on their raid. Shortly after, the apprentice gloated his master's death, and then died to Aliette. It is now the year 1492, and a band of adventurers enter this long-forgotten, blighted village. Goblins now reside here, ready to ambush anyone foolish enough to walk on by. You can talk to them and convince them you're one of them, avoiding conflict, or you can kill them as you please. They're stationed around the entirety of the village, some as guards ready to ambush, some searching for supplies, and some just goofing off and playing with a rather unfortunate deep gnome. They've marked the town as theirs by painting their emblem on the walls, and are keeping their loot dead center where it would be easier to guard. They serve both to introduce the Cult of the Absolute, the main antagonist of the game, and also the fact that you can align yourself to them, or at least make them think that you're on their side. Essentially, they serve to tell you that you can be good, you can be bad, you can be kinda good and kinda bad. The choice is in your hands, really. Similarly, there are 3 ogres that you can converse with or fight. These ones, however, you can also recruit for a future battle if your tongue is glib enough. As a side note, I find it quite charming that the ogres are found inside the schoolyard, specifically because of Lump the Enlightened, the one ogre with more than just a thought behind his eyes, thanks to the warped headband of intellect he once ate. What's even more charming is that an updated icon for this headband shows it being warped and gooped up. On the main road to the village, you'll find fresh supplies and a locked chest, now kept under the goblin's watchful eyes. I imagine that at least some of these items might have once belonged to Eridan's party, before they got ambushed and had to tuck tail and run. Aside from those supplies though, everything else in the village is now just non-consumables, with the exception of the apothecary's house, where you can also find rotten mushrooms. How delightful. I'm not quite sure if this was intentionally meant to serve as foreshadowing, though I do think that it was. But behind the apothecary's house, there is one singular apple that just so happens to be closest to the road that eventually leads to the sunlit wetlands. A wonderfully cheery place where Auntie Ethel was kind enough to leave many apples for us along the road. And that's the Blighted Village as it is now. Moonhaven was once a beautiful town with a prideful people that had their own stories, their own lives, their own goals and problems, but is now left forgotten and mostly destroyed. A village that once had a healthy economy with many merchants stopping by for trade is now home to goblins looking to ambush their next unsuspecting adventurer. Moonhaven is no more. Only a blighted village remains. But if you look closely, you can find glimpses of its former glory, a small taste of its once peaceful, vibrant past. A big thank you to my lovely art eaters and monsters from both my Patreon and YouTube members. You all are fantastic. If you want to support the channel, then please do consider joining their ranks. Also, if you fancy this sort of content, then do subscribe, like, and comment. It took a little bit longer than usual to make this video. This video is also a little bit longer than my usual video length, so that's probably why. But do let me know how you like this video, if you think I should, do things like this a little bit more, or if I should, maybe not. This channel is still relatively new and I'm still kind of deciding what it is that I want to do with it, but whatever I hyperfixate next, I suppose. Anyways, I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye!